Good morning, my dear students. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about characteristics of the Elizabethan age. So, let's talk about this great age in the history of English literature. Yes, you heard it right. I'm talking about the great Elizabethan age, also known as the Golden Age of England, the Renaissance, the Shakespearean age, the first great age of drama, and the second great age of poetry. Elizabethan age was remarkable and for its religious tolerance, strong national spirit, patriotism, social content, intellectual progress, and abundant enthusiasm. Incredible thoughts, feelings, and vigorous actions were the pillar of this age. It flows extraordinary development of drama. Equally, it is an age of poetry. The Elizabethan period was a period of glory and a triumph in the life and literature of the English people. So, Elizabeth was born on 7th September 1933 at Greenwich Palace and was named after both her grandmothers, Elizabeth of York and Elizabeth Howard. She was the second child of Henry VIII of England, born to survive infancy. Her mother was Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn. So, let's talk about her early life. When Elizabeth was 2 years and was executed on the 19th May 1533, Elizabeth was deprived of the title of princess. Elizabeth could write English, Latin, and Italian. Under talented and skillful tutor, she also progressed in French and Greek. She was one of the best educated women of her generation. So, popularity of poetry. Though the poetic production wasn't quite equal to the dramatic poetry enjoyed its heyday during the Elizabethan age, it was nevertheless of great and original beauty. Poetic fervour had bagged the entire age. Lyrics, songs, and sonnets were produced in huge amounts. England became the nest of the singing birds. There were notable improvements in versification. Spenser introduced patriotism and the melody into poetry. So, Elizabethan poetries were extraordinary because of its freshness, distinct variety, youth, as well as romantic feeling. This age saw the flowering of poetry. Era of sonnet. Sonnet was popularized in the period. It was introduced by Thomas Waite early in the 16th century. He introduced Patrician sonnet. Shakespeare made changes to the Italian model and then introduced his own style, known as the English sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet. Shakespeare wrote over 100 sonnets that were never different from Petrarchian sonnets. The reign of Queen Elizabeth became queen at the age of 25 on the 15th January 1559. Elizabeth was crowned at Westminster Abbey. From the start of Elizabethan reign, it was expected that she would marry, and the question arose to who. She never did, although she received many offers for her hand, and the reasons for this are not clear. So, emergence of Renaissance. In the Elizabethan age, there were two potent forces, the Renaissance and the Reformation. Both the forces blended and cooperated each other. These two movements produced a great uplifting of the spirit. The word Renaissance is originated from the Latin word nascere, which means be born, and the Renaissance was the time of the great improvement of art, literature, and learning in Europe. The Renaissance age began in the 14th century and extended till the 17th century. The Renaissance inspired the aesthetic and intellect potential, whereas the Reformation arose at the spiritual nature. New Classicism. The new passion for classical learning was rich and worthy in Swissicism. It became a danger to the language in all branches of literature, Greek and Latin usages. So began to force themselves upon English, which was not totally beneficial. English language gave away its native sturdiness and allowed itself to be tempered and polished by the new influences. From the start of Elizabethan reign, it was expected that she would marry, and the question arose for whom. She never did, although she received many offers for her hand. The reasons for this are not clear. So Elizabeth and her favorite. About the marriage question, Robert Dudley and the Earl of the Lancaster. The Queen's friendship with Dudley lasted for over 30 years and until his death. Development of drama. Drama during the Elizabethan age made a rapid and glorious leap into maturity. The drama was perfectly molded in the hands of the Shakespeare. Ben Jonson perfectly developed drama, although it had many early difficulties to overcome because of the disturbances caused by the actors. The theatres were closed between 1590 and 1593. In 1594, the problems were solved by the licentium of two troupes of players, the Lord of Chamberlains, among whom was Shakespeare, the Lord Admirals. Another early difficulty the drama had to face was its fondness for taking part in the quarrels of the time. For example, Marplot controversy owing to this meddling, the theatres were closed in 1589. Already also the considerable amount of the Puritan opposition was declaring itself. The most important and dramatic book of that time was Goston's School of Abuse, to which Sidney replied with his apology for poetry. Abundance of output. During the Elizabethan age, the historical situation encouraged a rich and healthy production of the literature of all kinds. A lot of interest was shown in the literary subjects. Treatises and the pamphlets were written freely, uplifting the quality of the literary output. Much abuse of a personal and scrupulous character that we indulged in literary questions became almost of national importance. So let's talk about the defeat, wars, and the overseas trade. The defeat of the Spanish Armada is one of the most famous events in the English history. Spain was the most powerful country in the world, and the Spanish fleet, consisting of over 100 ships, sailed up from Spain along the English Channel. But the English were waiting on the cliffs of England and Wales. Men watched the seas day and night, waiting for the first sighting of the Great Armada. As soon as the ships began to make their way up the channel, the fighting began. The Romanticism ended about the translation in the Elizabethan age. The Elizabethan age absorbed several important foreign books translations in the English language. By the 1579, many of the great books of ancient and modern times had been translated into English, almost all of them by 1603. The end of the Queen Elizabeth reign, just like the original works, the translations also gained popularity. Plutarch's Lives translation by Sir Thomas North, Montaigne's Essence translation by John Floria. Poetical translations were also much popular. For example, Arthur Golding translated Metaphors, Sir John Harrington translated all Aristotle's Orlando Furiosa, Richard Carey translated Tacitus' Jurisam Libertate. Spirit of Independence. Even though the writers borrowed literature from abroad, this age depicted an unbound spirit of independence and creativeness. Shakespeare often borrowed literature, but with his splendid creative imaginations, he transformed everything into gold. Spenser and stanza was introduced by Spenser, who gained the impression of creativity, boldness from his works. Inventiveness and interpretivity was his masterpiece. In short, during this age, the writer's outlook was broad and independent. Scottish literature. A curious minor feature of the age was the disappearance of the Scottish literature after its brief but remarkable appearance in the previous age. At this point it took to the ground and it didn't appear till late in the 18th century. So, let's continue. The Queen's health about the 10th year remained fair until the autumn in 1602. In March, Elizabeth fell sick, and she died on 24th March 1603 at Richmond Palace between 2 and 3 in the morning. Elizabeth was buried in the Westminster Abbey in the tomb she shared with her half-sister Mary. So let's continue, guys. Let's talk about the new Romanticism. The Elizabethan Romantic quest is for the magnificent and the beautiful. The Elizabethan age is the first and the greatest period of Romanticism. All these kind of desires were implied fulfilled by this age. So another early difficulty the drama had to face was its fondness for taking part in the quarrels of the time. For example, Marplate controversy owing to this meddling. The theatres were closed in 1589. Already also considerable amount of Puritan opposition was declaring itself. The most important anti-dramatic book of that time was Gosson's School of Abuse, to which Sidney replied with his apology for poetry. So, emergence of the Elizabethan age. In the Elizabethan age, there were no two-point forces, the Renaissance and the Reformation. Both the forces blended and cooperated each other. These two movements produced a great uplifting of the spirit. The word Renaissance is originated from the Latin word nasci, which means be born. Renaissance was a time of great improvement of art, literature, and learning in Europe. The Renaissance age began in the 14th century and extended till the 17th century. The Renaissance inspired the aesthetic and intellect potential, whereas the Reformation aroused the spiritual nature. So, though the poetical production wasn't quite equal to the dramatic, poetry enjoyed its heyday during the Elizabethan age. It was nevertheless of great and original beauty. Poetic fervor had beget the inter-age. So, guys, and in this lesson we're talking about the abundance of output during the Elizabethan age. The historical situation encourages a rich and healthy production of the literature of all kinds. A lot of interest was shown in literary subjects. Theatres, pamphlets were written freely, uplifting the quality of the literary output. Much abuse of a personal and scrupulous character that were indulged in literary questions because almost of national importance. New Romanticism, Elizabethan Romantic quest is for the magnificent and the beautiful. Elizabethan age is the first and the greatest period of Romanticism. All these kind of desires were amply fulfilled by this age. According to Albert, there was a daring, a resolute spirit of adventure, and literary as well as the other religions. And the most important of this was an unmistakable buoyance and the freshness in the strong wind of the spirit. It was the ardent youth of English literature.